This week, Aviad Mizrachi, CTO and co-founder of FrontEgg, joins us to discuss 3 layers of app security to keep hackers out and let customers in. In the security news, SSH under attack, IoT routers have vulnerabilities. The BLE spam attacks still work against iPhones. There's a longer story behind BLA spam, and Larry's one of the stars. Denial of pleasure via Bluetooth Low Energy, vulnerability disclosure in your blob is showing, the half-day watcher, tapping into cameras, 50 shades of vulnerabilities, nuclear decay is a random number generator, cache warp, Reptar, I'm not talking about dinosaurs, attacking Danish critical infrastructure, you can't patch a house of cards, and your Bitcoin may be at risk, and all that and more. On this episode of Paul's Security Weekly. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
And welcome to the show. But first, let me introduce you to a man who knows both reasons why you should never drink from the toilet, Mr. Paul Asadorian.
Coming to you in super low definition, compliments of Darth Vader himself. This is Paul's Security Weekly, episode number 807, being recorded on November 15th, 2023, right here in G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, Mr. Larry Pesce. The infamous Larry Pesce.
The infamous or the infamous?
Oh.
I don't know which one it is, but hey.
Hey, we'll talk about it after. I keep mentioning that you're famous. I mean, you are famous, but now you're famous for something else.
I still can't get a Wikipedia entry, though.
I know. You should now. I mean, you contributed to the Bluetooth spam problem, basically.
It's not exactly a problem.
No, it's not. Well, it depends on your perspective.
Save it for the show.
Okay.
Save it for the show.
Mr. Josh Marpet is here with us. Josh, welcome.
Pleasure to be here as always, and Wikipedia entries. We can work on that.
I've been hearing that for many years.
Right.
The problem is that you can't write your own Wikipedia entry, or I would have.
Larry, I'm not you.
I know you're not.
I mean, you could be anyone on the internet, literally.
Oh,
That's
God.
true.
Wait a minute. Josh is going to write my Wikipedia entry? Oh, God.
Is that cheap? Anyway, Mr. Sam Bound is also here with us. Sam, welcome.
Good evening. I'm glad to be here, and I can inform you that to get a Wikipedia entry, you just have to pay $8 a month.
There you go. That works. That's a strategy. Make sure you join our Discord channel to chat with the hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. You can visit securityweekly.com/Discord even to receive an invite. Dishcord is something different. It's all about doing dishes. If you want links to all of my social media, you can visit securitypodcaster.com. Although this week on Twitter or X, I guess they call it now, I will bow to Casey Ellis from Bug Crowd, who had one of the best Twitter posts that we'll talk about in the next segment. It was
one of the best X posts?
X posts. Twitter X posts. Yes.
X cross.
It's great. Aviad is the co-founder and CTO of FrontEgg, has 2 decades of experience as a developer, and is a longtime contributor to Dark Reading, InfoWorld, and other publications. His love for coding evolved into a passion for innovation, motivating him to create tools that allow developers to hatch great apps faster and focus on what they do best, innovate. Previously, Aviad was with Checkpoint Software Technologies, where he designed, architected, and scaled their cloud platform. Prior to Checkpoint, Aviad held multiple research, development, and technical leadership positions. He has a BA in computer science and an MBA from the Open University of Israel. Aviad, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It is nice to have you here on the show, Aviad. I'd like to start with all new guests that come on the show by asking you how you got your start in information security.
Oh my God, yeah. So, I'm going to be 42 next week, and I started like around 24 years ago with coding. And as anyone else, when you just start coding, you start with C, C++. I was implementing shell drivers where, everything was pretty easy, right? you're gonna deploy something on a computer, on a machine that is isolated from the internet. So everything was easy. When I discovered, my first, it was maybe 10 years later, I discovered my first SaaS, my first web installation. I saved password on a clear text on a database. And I want, and I was like, I'm kicking ass, I'm doing authentication, man. This is login password,
My authentication is so fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, for me it was like, 10 years ago, I was doing shell Win32 over C, and now I'm doing vanilla JavaScript, jQueries, and I'm saving passwords. So yeah, I'm a cybersecurity expert now. And then I think, when I started reading, I said, okay, I might be going down the wrong path over here. And then, I started reading more and more and more. I think, when I joined Checkpoint, this is where I understood I know pretty much nothing about security. And the world of authentication, JWTs, the rise of OpenID Connect, everything with regards of that, pretty much opened the world for me with everything with regards of authentication, authorization, and how this should be done properly. And this is where I understood that developers know, nothing about this kind of stuff, and they should never do that, because then they'll save passwords, clear text on databases where, and this is why, I'm trying to do what I do now.
It's interesting, Aviad. It makes me think of several examples, including a few this week, where I'm like, you didn't want to really do this yourself. You wanted it to go somewhere else. And anytime I tell a developer that's dealing with any kind of login or authentication or authorization, I'm like, you don't really want to write that code yourself. You want someone else that knew what they were doing to write that code, and hopefully you can find that code that hasn't been tainted or backdoored and has a clean supply chain, of course, to do that for you, because we don't want developers running around, like you said, implementing their own authentication mechanisms, because it never turns out good. I mean, you shouldn't say never, but rarely turns out good.
Yeah, I mean, in this world, authentication became kind of a commodity, and it makes maybe, the developer maybe become a little bit of lazy, because, okay, I'm going to delegate this service to someone else, but then, you kind of overlook the other stuff that you need to take care of. For example, context aware, right? So you have the user context. Are you actually propagating this user context on all of your queries? That's your responsibility. That's nothing, that had nothing to do with the authentication provider or your IDP. Are you propagating this? Yeah. Are you propagating the correct context to each and every one of your queries? Are you making sure that this context doesn't get overridden by anything? Okay, because then, this is the real problem that we see today. Right.
My favorite one, Aviad, that I want you to I'm sure you saw this, is with OAuth, where you have to actually validate the token. You can't just get the token from the user and assume it's good without validating where it came from. Yeah. And turns out I forget who did that research, but they're like, some sites forgot that step. So while you're using something else for some kind of authorization or authentication, or I guess OAuth is both technically, right? You still, like you said, have responsibilities to get it right.
Yeah, I mean, validate the token, and there is a small notion of this token which is called audience, right? Is that token intended to be used by your application? If not, I mean, let's discard it. And we see a lot of these use cases where you get a token, you don't validate it. Yeah, you go ahead with it. You get a token, you don't validate the audience. This token comes from, another application, and you trust it, for God's sake. And then, there goes the way towards account takeover and everything with regards of that. So, yeah, I mean, even if you trust an external IDP and, God forbid, go ahead and trust the external IDP, you don't want to implement this entire flows yourself, there still is a responsibility on the developer to make sure, okay, that the token is properly validated, properly signed. The token, is propagated and the context is propagated towards every part of the application, right? I mean, and applications are very complex today. Microservices, 50, 60, 100 microservices. You want to make sure that the context is properly propagated within them.
Absolutely. It's a daunting task when we think about all of the SaaS services that we allow our users to log into and being able to secure them in these environments. Like you said, all these applications are massive, and there's so many options, and we lose visibility now because we're outsourcing it, right? We've made this huge transition now where we don't want to have servers in our data center that are running applications. We want everyone to use something in the cloud or on the web and push it out that way. But there's trade-offs here.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, Paul, Nokia. Do you remember that there was a small cell phone called Nokia up until a few years ago, and they had a slogan called "Connecting People." Okay, and on the authentication world, we call it the OpenID Connect of the world. So I think the OpenID Connect, did create a massive transition on anything, how services communicate with each other. So, I don't have to know which service, I'm going to be integrating with as long as they are OpenID Connect compliant, right? Mm-hmm. So that pretty much, I'm calling it the open source of the authentication world, where, several applications, different companies, they can talk and integrate with each other just based on this OpenID Connect. Okay, but then you need to make sure that you are properly propagating and you are properly implementing this OpenID Connect. But when you're talking about microservices, different application, different services, integrations, right? You're integrating with Google, Microsoft, everyone are adopting OpenID Connect just to make sure that you are able to communicate, right, with another service, with another tool. Okay. And I think that pretty much as I see it, and it's pretty massive over the last few years, it became the standard of this world, and everyone are relying on that. And that's pretty massive because it creates like connectivity between different applications, different companies, even competitions, right? Competitors, they're talking with each other over OpenID Connect, and then you just, you have Lego glues and you just plug them together.
I think it was Sean Metcalf that was talking about issues with OpenID Connect, and it was striking to me that it's like a federated identity service. And we would talk about that at universities many, many years ago. We had Shibboleth. Shibboleth was one of the implementations of that. And I was like, well, that's great if we could trust users from other places, but like, what are we doing to validate not just who they are, but like whether or not they're malicious? Like, we're just, I get there's a trust model there, but it was kind of weak to me that we would use it to let anyone else on campus just come in and start authenticating to our stuff. I'm like, do we really trust those people? And then, like you said, it comes down to configuration. How do I say, well, you're trusted, but only for these things, not these other things?
Yeah. So, if you go, I don't know how bold you are, but if you go to OpenID Connect and you try to read the basic implementation guide, that's pretty easy. You say, okay, I can do that, right? But then the RFC is much more than that. There are so many different parts on how you can pass the token. What kind of token can you pass, right? There's a basic implementation guide, which is, the basic one. But then the RFC goes more and more, and there's so many extensions for the protocol. Mm-hmm. And then it gets complex because companies keep adding more and more and more extensions or more and more implementations to these basic implementations where once things get too big, okay, they're prone to errors. And this is what I see happening on the OpenID Connect. And this is exactly what you talked about, right? Where stuff is getting too complex to overcome.
Yeah, I want to ask about that. So the larger companies with the larger applications are building systems that are so complex that they're unmanageable. Did I hear you right?
That's not an unmanageable ones. Okay, so let's go to the OpenID Connect protocol. There is a basic implementation which requires just code, client ID, and client secret, and then you exchange tokens. And that's the basic implementation guide, and that's a pretty secure implementation guide based on trusted redirect URIs and that kind of stuff. Then there are legacy implementations of this, which requires implicit modes. And then, I'm going a bit too technical, but implicit modes, basically means that the token is flying out there on the redirect. And that means that this token is passed through every router or every, everything that you pass in the middle. The JWT, so it can be hijackable, but there's a legacy implementation of that. So can you trust it? Can you not trust it? How about devices? Can you trust the devices or not? Okay, how about
depends on your risk modeling, your threat modeling, and how you've built everything out, and what you trust and what you don't trust. I mean, that's the problem with every application.
Correct, but when you go to a 100 microservices or 200 microservices company, right? Let's say, it doesn't have to be an enterprise, okay? It can be an SME or SMB even, okay? Frontech is a 4 years old company, and just today I discovered we have around 60 microservices, okay? I was pretty amazed, but we have 60 microservices, and other companies has 200, 300. So that creates complex architecture and complex microservices architecture that you wanna kind of be able to manage. Yeah. And the management around it is not easy, right? How do you pass the context? How do you pass the JWT? Do you have a centralized identity store or not? And it becomes a bit cumbersome to walk around all of these items. And then, if you're just getting started, that's easy, right? You're going to get started with the newest technology and the newest standard. But if you go and you have a 10 years old legacy application, okay, the refactor around this application will be hard. And this is where it becomes a bit cumbersome, because you have the newer technology and you want to stick with the newer technology. And then you have their own legacy apps that want to communicate over the same protocols. And then what you do with that. So this is, on the SMEs, and the enterprises where multi-apps is part of that. And they want to all rely on the same login store, same identity store. It becomes a bit risky and a bit hard to manage.
Well, I mean, and now you're also talking about, and I'm sort of going a little farther afield, forgive me, but so many companies are not only dealing with zero trust mandates, where they have to have authentication every bloody place, okay? But you're also dealing with companies that want to talk to other companies or transfer identities across corporate lines, organizational lines, because they need to data share and they need to have an identity here and there. It's a lot easier to use the same identity in multiple places. So, I mean, by the time you get done with this, you've got, 60 to 100 microservices. You've got identities in multiple organizations. You've got, or you're trying to use the same identity in multiple organizations, I should say. You've got zero trust, auth and authenticity barriers everywhere. Identity is not a small thing right now.
It's not a small thing. I mean, let's think about, standard company, right? They have a login to their SaaS application. Now they have a support tool. Do you have a central identity store, or do you have, the support user start? Let's take Zendesk, for example, right? So you have a Zendesk application from one hand, and then you have your application from another hand. Do you have the Zendesk, implementation using the same identity store as your application using OpenID Connect /SAML? Or, do you force your users to recreate, another identity on Zendesk? Now let's think about it for a second. But if you want them to use the same identity, that's perfect, right? But then you need your identity provider / your identity implementation to support these protocols, okay, common protocols, whether it's SAML, whether it's OpenID Connect. and this is why I say that it becomes a bridge between different companies, right? So if you don't want, if you don't have it available in place or you built it wrong, okay, then you're forcing your users to create another identity in tools like Zendesk, in tools like, your documentation and everything around that. And that's really a hassle for them, because now, they have different identities to manage. They will change a password on one tool, okay, and it doesn't affect the other tool. So that's, forget about password managers, forget about everything else. If they connect, that's a security risk, right? They connect to your dashboard, they connect to their own IDP using, any one of the workforce IDPs. It doesn't affect all the other tools, and that creates a really security hole within your organization.
And then it just gets progressively worse the more applications that you have.
Yeah, and this is where it gets complex for the larger companies, because they have more and more and more application to manage and to handle. They want to connect everyone, all the applications, and they want to connect all the users that they have to the central identity store. But the question is how they do that, and protocols is essentially the way to do that, but in most of the enterprises I've witnessed, and I've worked with one, Checkpoint, is a 6,000 employees, organization. Not all of the implementations were the newer one. Okay, you had some of them, implemented like 10, 12 years ago. OpenID Connect and JWTs were not a thing back then. Okay. So then
I just want to say, Aviad, in university, we had LDAP and Kerberos. An application written in Perl that was doing the federated identity for applications across the university. I guarantee you there was some kind of security issues there. I was just getting started in security and was just trying to wrap my brain around how LDAP and Kerberos worked. And I was like, now I understand why back then they wrote their own, because we didn't have a lot of these newer standards and protocols in applications that do it for us. But it sounds like we still have a lot of work to do, because it's about the implementation and design choices.
Correct. And we are,
that's a very sophisticated, secure system. Nobody speaks Perl.
Well, that's true anymore.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yeah, so we are 2023 facing 2024, and the number of applications that are maintaining a session-based cookies, a proprietary algorithms. Forget about JWTs, just session-based, There are so many of them, okay? You just open your network tab, you'll see them. And for them to integrate with another tool is like impossible. So they have, and think about 12 years ago, it was, I'm sharing the same story as clear text, right? So for that to happen with integrations, these applications needs to be to go through some kind of a refactor on the authentication side or on the identity side in order to be able to cope with the changes.
And do most organizations host, like, where do they host the identity provider? Is it Active Directory or... Usually Active Directory, right? If it's an enterprise, it's Active Directory. If you're providing an application, right, it looks much different. There's a lot of cloud native stuff you could use, right?
So it's like an indefinite tango that is going on for enterprises where, they're going to change the head of IT. The head of IT will say, okay, we are going 100% cloud. Okay, and then going to switch to to the cloud-based ADs, whether it's an Okta ping identity, it doesn't have to be. And then, it just takes one breach for them, to get a call from the CEO to say, okay, we're going back to the on-prem. Okay, so that's kind of a tango that I hear from my friends, from my CISA friends, and from my enterprise employees friends, that you go back and forth with that. I think that private clouds are very popular these days. Okay, don't sit. Even if I want to set up my own 80, or if I want to set up my own my own IDP, I'm going to set it up within my cluster or within my private cloud. Okay, I'm going to still call it a cloud. Okay, but it's going to be a private one where I don't share any resources with any other companies, and that makes people less worried in terms of being able to identify breaches or something like that, but it makes them more vulnerable for reliability and scalability stuff, but still security wins here.
I'm assuming too on the enterprise side that you end up with a lot of different authentication mechanisms in IDPs, because especially if you've been around for some time, or internal applications, like some of those use like their own developer wrote the authentication. Like maybe we tried to hook it into AD. Then we got these cloud apps, so those use Okta, but then we got this other thing and it uses yet a different and then we're trying to tie them all together. Like you can create like a really huge mess, I would imagine, in a lot of organizations, and not knocking them, but like that's just a natural progression of it sometimes.
Totally, yeah. So it's huge mess, from operation side, and it's a huge mess from visibility side. I mean, you go to an IT administrator, a CISO in these huge enterprises, and you're gonna ask him, how many applications do you have within your organization, or how many applications, which application is using what? And they're clueless. Okay. And by the way, even if they're gonna task one of their employees with the task of, go ahead and check out how many applications do you have, or how many applications are using what. Okay. It's going to take a few months to get this information, because you're going to need to go, especially on these large enterprises, you're going to need to go through each and every one of these R&D departments. How many applications do you run? How do they connect? Okay. I don't know. Let's ask the architect. Okay. The architect is on vacation. Let's ask the team lead. Okay. So that's the kind of chaos that, that they are facing with, without a central identity, sir.
Yeah, and if you have applications that you've written yourself, adapting them to a different authentication and especially authorization mechanism is not a short order. Like that's a tall order potentially.
Yeah,
right? In most cases, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, and I'm going back to my previous, if I'm implementing a session-based, cookie-based, proprietary authentication method, I have an internal app. Okay, this is what I chose to do. It was 10 years ago. Now I'm being tasked with, something that I need to connect everything to a central identity store, such as OpenID Connect, IDP, or SAML-based IDP. That requires some effort on my internal application side. So how, and I have to do that, right? If I want to cope and if I want to comply with the enterprise rules or the organization rules, I have to do that stuff. And for me to do that, okay, I have to change and refactor everything with regards of my IDP side, okay? Whether it's a migration of users or just trusting, the users that come from the IDP, make sure that, I have my own client credentials to use for the redirect flows, and everything with regards of that will require some work from my side. However, okay, once all of the applications on the organizations are going to comply, I'm going to, all feed to the same IDP, that creates a lot of organization within, this enterprise where everything is being shifted and everything is being managed by a central identity store.
Aviad, what are some of the like specific attack examples that are taking advantage of I mean, I think of what we defined to this point is it can be like a really big hot mess when it comes to authentication, right? What are some specific attacks that you like to use as examples as to why we need to get better in this space?
Let's go, I think it was 3 weeks ago with the Okta breach, right? So, that was a classic supply chain attack, right? There was a support tool that got hacked. And then, just browsing on this support tool, you identified HAR files of customers. These HAR files contained JWTs. Using these JWTs, you managed to hack to the customers, okay, and get unauthorized access. And then from there, it's like, you can do whatever you want. So it's a classic supply chain attack, okay? And there are several questions on, I think that no one in the industry really thought about HAR files as, a potential attack vector. And then this happened. But if you think about it, that's another tool that was used by a company, contains sensitive information, right? And then this use of JWTs, you want to think about it. Can I use this JWT without any proof that I'm actually, federated, or I'm actually who I claim, I'm supposed to be? And that created a lot of questions within the industry. Same for, JWTs, specifically when using over, cookies/headers, contains potential attack for customers. For example, devices, right? You just take this JWT, you try to use it from a different device. Do you want to, do you just expect to be passed, or should you be challenged? And we see more and more attack vectors around that, where, men in the middle or anything in the middle just hack or get these JWTs and try to use it from different machines, different computers, different countries. And this is we see a lot of this.
JWTs, they're kind of like PHP, like great tool, but really easy to make security blunders is kind of where I put JWTs in my mind. Is that true? You agree with that?
Yeah, that's correct. And this is, whenever, a developer talks with me about JWT, say, Aviad, what would you recommend? I say, keep it short, keep it as short as you can. Okay. So JWT has a great factor of expiration. So if you keep it as short as you can and keep the refresh tokens safe and long, okay, so user experience remains solid, okay, but security remains solid from the other hand, well, JWTs are short, and even if they got hijacked, right, after 10 seconds, okay, they are gone. So there's nothing you can do with that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great advice. Questions, Josh, Larry?
Not off the top.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you guys out.
No, I mean it's fascinating to me. So I've got a weird question for you, Aviad. I have this concept that I've been calling multicellular security. And what I mean by that is, 20 years ago, every company was a single-celled organism. It was complete in and of itself, right? They had a perimeter, normally from a checkpoint firewall, so you might have known something about that, little details. And they did all their data processing, all their data generation, data aggregate, everything was inside their perimeter, right? And Larry knows because he was there. He's old. It's no big deal, Larry. It's cool. And so am I. I'm just kidding. But nowadays, we have these data sharing partners, hundreds, thousands of them, microservices galore. We've fragmented how we deal with data and processing of that data to such an extent that we cling to this fiction that we are an organization with a perimeter, but we really aren't. And so I contend that if we treat, I'm long-winded, I apologize. I contend that if we treat our supply chain as a multicellular organism, why are we having a SOC for every single company? Why are we having a a store of identity for every single company? Why do we have everything split up for everybody? It's so expensive that way, for Christ's sake. Why don't we do things like, I've got 5 companies in my supply chain and my value chain. Great. We'll each pay for a fifth of a SOC. We'll each pay for a fifth of a SIM. Although Splunk would like to charge you for all of it for everybody, but we'll starve them a little bit. It's okay. I mean, your point about having independent stores of identity centralized across multiple organizations, I mean, does that kind of fit what I'm talking about, or am I way off base in my understanding?
Yeah, so it's kind of a fit, but the idea is that, let's take Frontech as an example.
I'm sorry, it's a weird question. I apologize.
Yeah, no worries. We are here for the witness, so yeah.
You're in the right
let's
place.
let's take Frontech for example, right? So my product managers will use Miro, the drawing tool, okay, and they'll use some other product tools, Heap, etc., Mixpanel, okay. My engineers and developers will use Jira, GitHub, and that kind of stuff. They're all being federated, okay, to the same identity provider that we have as a central identity store. So we can we trust it? Okay. What I say is not, because in GitHub, we enforce more security tools and more security regulations and more security policies on top of this federation, okay? Because I want to make sure that even if someone got access to my computer, okay, still, in order to push code, they need to do an additional MFA, or they need to have an additional device on that. And you know what? When I'm drawing stuff in Miro, I don't care. Okay, so this is why it might be fragmented, or it might be, and again, it's all going to be, I don't have a separate identity in Miro and a separate identity in GitHub. All of the identities will be federated to my identity store, okay, or to my IDP, to my workforce IDP. But still, the security policies and security roles will be segregated and will be defined based on the criticality of the tool. So, it might be that, not every one of the tools requires SOC, okay? But still, some tools are more sensitive than others. And I will want to make sure that my GitHub and my Jira and everything with regards of, how I ship code to production, okay, is more secure than, how do I draw how do I brainstorm things on my product definitions? This is how I see it, in terms of criticality. And eventually, when you are leading, okay, you want to sleep good at night. So you want to make sure that you applied just yet another security policy on yet another tool. And you say, okay, I'm safe. I'm going to go to sleep.
Yeah, so, Aviad, is this what you mean by the tri-layered security architecture, right? Which you've defined as detect attacks sooner, slow attackers down, and stop them, right? And it's that's a great high-level message, right? But going deeper into that is basically AAA, right? But forcing that into, I can authenticate, but in order for me to do something extra, I have to further prove my identity or give some other measure before that application trusts me to do a certain action, correct?
100%. Think about, I guess that we all use banking applications. I hope so, that we're not saving, our bucks, behind our sofas. But we all use banking applications, and, we log in, and that's cool. Sometimes we even log in with SMS, God forbid. Mm-hmm. But then, if we want to wire some funds to our aunt in North Carolina, mm-hmm. So we have to prove that we are actually who we claim we are. And then it will require, even if we logged in like 5 minutes ago, it will require another proof, right? It will send us an email. It will send us another SMS. It will ask us to wipe, our finger and scan it. So there goes, another way. And you know what? Paul, that I think the way it should go. It should be, because you want to be as frictionless as you can when you log into the application. I had a very interesting discussion with my mother a few months ago about security, where she's very technical. She's leading technology at one of the largest companies in Israel, and she doesn't like to do MFA.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a CTO of an identity platform company, so I said, Mom, you need to have an MFA here. And she said, yeah, I tried, but then they asked me for a Google Authenticator, and I said, okay. And she said, it's too hard, I need to download it, and the user experience is really bad. And I said, okay, do they have another option? And she said, yeah, they have SMS. And I said, you know what, in Checkpoint, that's what we did. We hacked phones all the day, all day long. And SMS is not safe. But, and this is where, the punchline I gave to her was, some security is better than no security at all. So that's the case here. You wanna provide to this, and my mother is, 67. So I told her, that's okay. Okay. They probably did not the best user experience for you in order to be able to log in properly to this application. But please go ahead and put your phone number, just so you have some sort of security. It's not the best security, but some sort of security for MFA. And, if there's a device, remember my device and that kind of stuff, that will even create another, frictionless experience for you to log into your application. And that's, I see it in bunch of applications where sometimes we take, the UX side, sometimes we take the security side. If we take the security side, that means that we're gonna promote our users with every login with MFA, and probably they're gonna curse us along the way. But if we're gonna take the user experience side, we're gonna say, okay, you know what? That's a frictionless login. If you really need security, let's talk about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It runs the gamut. So recently, I logged into a software application, a site that provides software application, and I was able to change all my stuff, my password, my email, everything, and it didn't ask me for even my password again to change all that stuff. I'm like, well, that's really bad. I won't say which software it was, maybe off air, but I was like, that's like red flag, right? But then you get other applications where if I want to take a specific action, such as a money transfer or whatever, they're like, well, you need to either give me your password again or give me your multi-factor, some kind of other factor of authentication. But they've had to build that into the app. So does this additional authorization really come down to the application has to be aware of it and you have to build it into your app, right? Developers have to do this, and how do we make it easy for them to do this?
So, eventually developers have to build it, okay? But that's, we were talking about OpenID Connect, right? A few minutes ago. That's part of the RFC.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So you have to build it, but there are tools, okay, that, step up / challenge authentication is built into that. So yeah, as long as it's part of the RFC, there's gonna be a central identity store tool that implements that. But yeah, I mean that's a question of a proper mix between user experience. And why the banking application promoted you for step up and that application didn't, because the banking application has a lot to lose in case money, your money got stolen, and the other application, they don't. Right.
Yeah, and so I guess it still comes down to risk management for organizations to make the rest of us secure, right? It's still their risk management decision because they have to put code in the application to make it 100%. Better security for the users. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can rest assured that probably when they just launched the application, they didn't have any step up. But then some accounts got broken into, and some accounts got money stolen, and then they had to build it up.
Then they moved off of SMS.
They moved off SMS. Yeah. You know what? Again, if I'm going back to to the story about my mother, they didn't go off SMS because sometimes when you build security, you have to build security for your grandma. Okay, because if banking applications, they're gonna be used by tech savvies, okay, but they're gonna be used by our grandmas, and to expect my grandma to do a passkey onboarding, okay, that's not gonna happen. Okay, so. Or to expect her to download the Google Authenticator to scan the barcode, okay, to copy the text and, put it, that's like 6 different steps that she needs to do.
Yeah. Now, my own personal story on that, Aviad, is years ago, I did that, and then I changed phones, and I didn't pay attention, and my authenticator went bye-bye. And I was like, that was a horrible user experience. I'm doing a physical YubiKey token as my second factor. But then not everything supports the YubiKey. And then you have the other usability thing where I've got my laptop, got my coffee, sitting comfortably on my couch, getting ready to get some work done. I log in, it goes, oh, you need your YubiKey. I'm like, it's like upstairs in my pocket or something like that. So I'm like, I'll just get multiple YubiKeys, and then it's like, well, which one was, and it gets out of hand. And ultimately, I came back to the Authenticator app because Google, in this case, has gotten better about now transferring, right? They're very purposeful about going, yes, I will authenticate again. I think it makes you authenticate again before there's like a separate authentication step and goes, yeah, I'll transfer your Authenticator stuff. And I'm like, oh, this is what I like to do now. And I'm on board with it. So even tech savvy users still kind of run into I don't want to deal with the hassle kind of thing, right? So it's not just your grandma or less tech savvy people. Everyone has their certain profiles, the way they like to work.
Totally, and this is why I say, you don't want to, when you build security, you don't want to settle for one factor. Okay, let your users choose. Okay, I mean, eventually, and I keep going back to that sentence. Some security is better than no security. So. If you let your users choose, and sometimes, I run demos on the Frontech platform, and I, my phone is not with me. So, and I got promoted for MFA. So luckily I have my, Apple, Apple Watch with me. So it jumps here. So, I don't have my fingerprint. It goes through SMS over here. So because I have 4 different options, so I can choose which MFA device I want to use. So,
right.
Again, if you give the flexibility, you kind of let your users, choose, and you make it easier for them to use security. Security.
I like the phone. I have Android, right? So Google can do a push to your phone. It's like, hey, do you want to allow this authentication or not? Yeah. Right? It's not the Authenticator app. It's actually a push to my phone. I'm like, I kind of like that because it's not dependent on an application on my phone. It is my phone, right? And I can say yes. And that's more convenient. I don't know security-wise exactly how they compare, to be quite honest. But usability-wise, I'm like, oh, that's kind of nice.
Totally, just another seed, yeah.
So, Avia, what exactly does Frontdeck do for our audience?
So, Frontdeck is a SIAM tool, a customer identity and access management tool. So, we are basically an IDP for our customers. So, a customer Frontdeck will integrate Frontdeck into their app, and that will, kind of take the entire stack of authentication, authorization, user management, and self-serve delegated administration for their end customers, so that kind of, lifts off all of the burden from the developers to Frontdeck. Complete SaaS tool. We try to keep the integration very lean. And then basically we are an IDP. So that means that if a SaaS application is integrating with Frontdeck, all of the login is propagated through Fronteg. The users of that application will log in to Fronteg. They'll be able to onboard their own IDPs, external IDPs, workforce IDPs, invite users, define roles, define permissions, invite another users, and everything on a multi-tenant way.
So you're kind of like a, forgive the term, proxy. So I have all my applications, I have Fronteg, and then beyond that, I could have IDPs and all kinds of other stuff, but you make it easier to integrate, basically.
Yeah. So Fronteg is an IDP, but Fronteg can be a service provider as well. So you can put your users on Fronteg. You can have Fronteg, delegate or federate to other IDPs. Fronteg also deals with authorization and advanced authorization, such as RBAC, subscription plans, authorization, feature flag authorization, and everything with regards of that. Fine grade authorization, obviously. We're trying to keep, get the entire stack of authentication authorization on us and release the developers to their day-to-day tasks.
Yeah. So you make it easy for the developer to integrate. You give them one place to integrate, but that can be infinite possibilities basically on the back end. But developer knows, like, I got these API calls off the front end, and I know what code I need to put in what places, and everything else is taken care of for me.
Correct. Yeah,
that's pretty nice. Exactly. As a developer, I struggle with that too, because you get into conversations, you're like, well, should we integrate the authentication with AD? Should we have a Google login? But then everyone needs a Google account. Then we got to have multiple options. Now we're maintaining it, and then we're using, if we go to the cloud, we want to use Incognito for our custom application, which is a complete nightmare, actually. I think a lot of people warned me about it or told me about it after the fact, like, no, don't. I mean, do that, but not do that, but there's caveats, right? So you're taking away a lot of that friction that I just described, essentially.
Correct. And we try to make it, developer friendly from one hand, and then complete no-code experience, for everything with regards of configuration, look and feel, etc. from another hand. So kind of a mix of both.
Sweet. So when did you create Fronteg? What was so tell me a little bit of the story, like your co-founder. How did that all come together?
Yeah. So we founded Fronteg October 2019, even before COVID. Sagi and myself, Sagi is my co-founder and CEO of the company. We had a privilege of meeting a few years prior to that in Checkpoint, where we had, so Checkpoint was going through what we call the SaaS era. So moving all of this on-prem. So Checkpoint is an on-prem company, right?
Yeah.
Firewalls, etc. So going from that firewalls on-prem to the cloud, okay? But when a company on the size of Checkpoint does that included 100 different products, okay? So you think about it. You have 100 different groups sitting in rooms, different rooms right next to each other, and building out SaaS projects, okay? Each and every one of these SaaS projects was intended to be different technology, different look and feel, okay? And they had to build authentication, authorization, notification management, event, audit logs, etc., etc. So we were tasked with creating a full, centralized SaaS platform, identity store, an identity provider, that all of these SaaS applications will be able to basically, I would say, ride on, okay? So there comes the Checkpoint, we managed to create the Checkpoint Identity Platform and Checkpoint Identity Portal and Infinity Portal, where all of the SaaS applications of Checkpoint now, basically ride on and leverage. So more than, if I'm not mistaken, 70 or 80 different applications are, using this platform. And when we left Checkpoint, we kind of understood that this problem doesn't just, it's not a Checkpoint problem. That's a global problem.
Right.
Developers, what we call the platform teams. So each company set up a platform team, and they are building authentication, authorization. Even if they are, integrating different tools, they still have to work a lot of, very hard in order to integrate this authentication and authorization, and what RBAC mechanism are we using, and how do we support these APIs, etc. So this is what we try to do. We try to make it easier for developers, so developers doesn't have to build it never again.
That's awesome. So you wrote in your experience of Checkpoint and said, we can solve this problem for lots of other people, not just Checkpoint.
Yeah. And, going back to the first 5 minutes, I'm 42 at the age of, 27, I think, 28. This was my first time of writing a clear text password to the data. So
you've come a long way. You've come a long way since then, Aviad.
Yeah, but I don't want anyone to do this mistake again.
Right. No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah.
So what do you got coming out next at Frontend? Tell me about what you guys are doing today.
So we just had our, huge launch around everything with regards of security. So bunch of new security engines, proprietary bot detections, stale users, excessive use, and anomalies. We just launched our entitlements engine, which kind of bridges the gap between different authorization scheme and authorization decisions, such as RBAC, subscription plans, and feature flag, all sit under the same API. Yeah, where developer doesn't have to do
entitlements review.
So not
can you
yet.
Do entitlements review?
That's gonna come. That's gonna come as part of access request and permission request and everything with regards of I'm doing an approval cycle as well.
Wait, so an entitlements review is which users have which access across all my systems?
Yeah, and should they have that access? Yeah, according to the role they're in, have they had privilege creep? Have they, do they have inappropriate entitlements? All that kind of stuff.
I think I know where
When
Josh
does that
is.
happen?
I think I know where Josh is going. Is if you're the victim of an audit and you have to provide that, it's a lot of work.
Yeah. So we are not going there. We are not going there yet. But sharing my stories from this tool, I talked about Miro. So in order to configure SSO in this tool called Miro, I have to be an administrator from one hand, and I need to have a pro plan from another hand. Okay? And that means that the developer of Miro needs to check two different APIs, okay, in order to be able to evaluate if I can do a certain action. Okay? Now, every business decision that is happening there, for example, if I want to move the SSO to a different tier, okay, or if I want to just allow this specific user, specific account, regardless of if they are part of the pro plan or not, okay, that's going to involve the developer. With Frontend, it doesn't have to involve the developer, okay, because all of the decisions happen within our proprietary SDK, and where we take into consideration all of these different authorization decisions into a single API. So that's what we call it. Yeah, that's what we call our.
And you realize since SailPoint got bought by Thoma Bravo, and they're the primary entitlements checker for most larger companies, and everybody that I know of that I've talked to is freaked out about SailPoint when it comes out of the Thoma Bravo embrace, what it's going to look like. This is very timely. So can I suggest that be heavy on your roadmap? Just,
Yeah. So yeah, that's what we're gonna add more and more capabilities under these engines, and continue to free the developers from these tedious works.
Awesome, Aviad. I just have 5 questions left for you. Are you ready to play 5 questions with Security Weekly?
Let's go.
3 words to describe yourself.
Negronis. That's the first one. Yeah, we just talked about it. Negronis. I would say tuba is the second one, and enthusiast is going to be the third one.
If you were a serial killer, what would be your weapon of choice?
A Big Mag. Yeah, that's probably going to be this one.
A what now?
Mag is this huge weapon where you fire, you can just pull the trigger and just fires.
MG machine gun.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not pronounced Mag. It's MG.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
If I wrote a book on my wow, that's a good one. How to found, how I found a startup maintains a relationship. That's probably the goal.
That's a good book. I'd read that.
I'd read that too. What is your favorite hacker movie?
I don't have much of a hacker movie. If I go to non-hacker movies and probably gonna be. I don't have much of hacker movies to, I have
hackers, war games, sneakers, Matrix.
What's your favorite movie overall?
There you go.
Yeah, on the last year, whenever I need to get some laugh, I watch The Dictator.
Okay.
Fantastic. Choose two celebrities to be your parents.
Alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
Celebrities to be my parents. Yeah, it's probably gonna be Michael Jordan for the winners approach. That's one. And the other one gonna be probably that's not a common one. It's gonna be the composer Gustav Mahler. He's really like a fan of. Yeah,
that's definitely. We have not heard Gustav Mahler before.
Or Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time. I can't believe people debate that Michael Jordan is not the greatest. I mean, and then
he's gonna be. Yeah, I'm sorry to say that he's gonna probably not gonna be the best dad, but
right. He's definitely the best basketball player.
I just need 5 minutes. I don't need much more.
Aviad, thank you so much for appearing on Paul Security Weekly.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a blast.
Lots of fun. Stay tuned. The security news coming up next.